color. Just to give everyone a heads up, this isn't just a presentation, it's a conversation, so feel free to post any questions or comments to our YouTube, or you can tweet us directly at RPS123shoot. And if you're listening to this after the live broadcast, please still ask away. We'll follow up on any comments that are posted later. And for those of you who don't know us, my name is Valerie Kinney. I'm the content marketer here at Rock, Paper, Scissors. We are a branding and marketing firm, and we've been here in this business for 30 years. So we've seen a lot of change. We've done a lot of changing ourselves to keep up with the time. And we like to focus on our clients' brands, not just their logos and their marketing collateral, but the entire experience. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the power of color, and joining us today, we have our CEO and creative director, Amanda Sutt, as well as Caitlin Henry, one of our designers, and they'll be sharing a little bit about their expertise here in just a few minutes. So when you think of fall, many people are thinking about pumpkin spice lattes and all those fun things that come along with the season, but we're of course thinking about the gorgeous colors that come with the season here in North Georgia, and so that's inspired us to start a conversation about the importance of color and how it applies to your business's branding and marketing efforts. Color, we like to look at it as a reflection of your business, and each color is usually associated with certain characteristics or emotions that can trigger a positive or a negative association with an audience. So when you think about that, if your brand is energetic, you want to make sure you're choosing those vibrant colors that reflect that. While if your brand is all about tranquility, you want to opt for something a little more soothing. And ultimately, you want to make sure that the colors you're choosing paint an accurate picture of your brand in your audience's mind. So now we're going to take a few minutes to look at some examples of what these colors represent. And first, we're going to take a look at the color blue. So Caitlin, if you could tell us a little bit about the characteristics and the traits that are associated with this color.
With blue is viewed as more of a trustworthy, dependable, and committed color. People see it and it creates a more calming effect, so it appears more stable. We see a lot of political figures, like our presidents, they choose different shades of blue it's to show that they are committed, that they are trustworthy, and they can be depended on.
Great. And next, we're taking a look at the color orange. What do people need to know about this color?
Well, according to the sensational color, the color sparks more controversy than any other hue. It radiates warmth and is full of energy, but it also brings up a strong love or hate response, more than any other color.
So I guess for myself and other UGA fans out there, this might be why we have such a strong dislike for Florida and Tennessee. I'm sure you guys have all seen the t-shirts that say orange is ugly and have all the SEC teams with orange on there. So just throwing that out there. Next, we are going to look at the color red. Amanda, tell us a little bit about this color and what it reflects.
Sure. So red it's some of the more prominent brands you'll think about as you see Target, Budweiser. It is naturally very exciting and attention-grabbing, but it can also have a lot of negative feelings. It can be the idea of being in the red from finances or tempting the bull. It's also the color of fire and blood. So it has a lot of because that high energy also comes from war and danger, but the flip side of it, it's also strength and power and determination. So it has some really interesting choices when you're working with it. You also want to, then there's also the passion and the desire and love, that side of the color. And some random facts about it is that it enhances the human metabolism, also increases respiratory rate and raises blood pressure. So in a medical office, I would not recommend painting an entire room red. You might have some problems.
Good advice. All right, so next, what about the color green?
So green is one of the most common colors in the natural world, and it's generally associated with money and the environment. It's usually if you want to do it with ideas of being fresh or having growth. So there's a lot you can do with green too. Not as much negative with green.
Cool. So now we're looking at yellow, and Caitlin, what can you tell us about that color and the feelings that are associated with it?
Yellow is something we don't see a whole lot in the design world at least branding wise, but it does have a more optimistic and happy feeling associated with it. You see it in a lot. The brands that do have it, they stick out, and they make sure that the yellow matches their values and mission.
Great. And now we come to the color black. Amanda, what does that color typically represent?
The unknown and the dark abyss. Okay, well, maybe there's more to it than that. But black can be a representative of authority and power. It can be used for intimidation. It always comes to mind thinking of like the American Express black card. It's very sophisticated, and it borders the line of seduction as well. But it's also important to kind of look at the other side of black, which is the not necessarily white, but grays that are in between, which are very neutral. So it's an interesting how the true pigment of it has such a impact, whereas the tints of it are completely opposite of that. So,
great. So now we've looked at the different associations that you can have with a particular color. It's also important to think about challenges that colors sometimes present, and we're going to get into this a little bit deeper later on in the presentation, but like we talked about with red, it can either be too aggressive or it might come off more pink than you want it to. Yellow, there's a lot of different versions, and the human eye, each eye can perceive it a little bit differently. So there are a lot of challenges to work through, and Caitlin brought up a good point as we were planning, that it really is all about perception. So I'm going to let her dive into that a little bit more.
So color is all about perception. And it's actually, scientists have come up with the theory that men actually see a lesser color range than women. It's due to evolution and genetics that women have more alleles that allow them to see different wavelengths of color. So you see more color. So if you're at the paint store and he just says that's blue, and you're like, no, that's baby blue. He comes by honestly, I promise. So it's interesting to see how big of a shift and a gap there is.
So with that in mind, there are definitely going to be challenges when you're working with color as you're developing your branding, and that's what brings us to color systems. And these color systems help you ensure that, this particular shade of seafoam green or teal green, whatever you're working with, that's the main color in your branding. These systems help you remain consistent from your website to the printed materials and everything in between. So let's talk about these systems a little bit. The first we're going to look at is CMYK, and Amanda is going to tell us about this system and how it works.
Sure. So CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And it is the breakdown of what basically those four colors will when you layer them together, will create any color in the printed world. So typically, if you think about if you have your little laser jet printer at home, you have a little color cartridge, and it is cyan, magenta, and yellow, and usually have a separate black one. Picture, if you look at it, it breaks out how that image below is made up of cyan, then magenta, yellow, and black. And so this kind of dates me a little bit from when I first started doing this. I used to do what are called match prints, which were when something was going to press, you would make sure you've separated all of your colors properly so that it makes what you need it to make. And so I would actually have to take film, which is very similar to what you used to have in a camera, but it was separated into the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. But then I would have to recreate the final image by taking a cyan sheet with the cyan piece of film, magenta, yellow, black, and basically rebuild certain pages and projects to be able to make sure that we'd separated it correctly and that it did everything it needed to. So you got to see the image basically build itself, because you'd start with that level of cyan, and so it'd be all blue. Then you'd add the magenta on it, so you'd start to get some purples. Then you'd add the yellow and it would turn really ugly. And then as soon as you put the black on it, it would be the image. So it was a really neat way to actually see how that image was built up. And so it's in that same order every time. And if you ever want to see how that actually works, if you ever take like a cereal box or like a Coke can box, if you open up the box to like flatten it, if you recycle, you'll actually see little squares on the white area that are the breakdown. And so it's showing the test that they run to be able to print that on a press.
Awesome. So next, we're going to look at the RGB system, and Caitlin is going to share with us a little bit more about it.
So RGB is used mostly, it's red, green, and blue, and it's used mostly for TVs, computer monitors, your cell phone, theater systems. It's the additive color system where it takes black and adds in these brighter colors of red, green, and blue. It employs light, and it is actually, you can actually tweak it a lot easier than you can with CMYK. So if your screen looks a little off, it's a little nudge as opposed to a whole printing change.
Great. So next, that brings us to the system that I'm most familiar with, having a past working with interior designers, and that's the Pantone color matching system. And Amanda's going to give us a few more details on this one.
Sure. A lot of people, you'll hear it as called the PMS colors, which stands for Pantone matching system. It's been around since the 50s, and basically it's a standardization to make sure that your colors really match up. As opposed to doing a built color, what we're talking about with the CMYK, it's actually a pre-mixed ink. So basically, if you're going to print something with a PMS color, the printer orders a can of ink, very similar to like a can of paint, so that it is very, very consistent. And so very similar, we'll go back to those talking about with the box tops or like cereal boxes or Coke can boxes. Especially if you look at Coke, you will see the CMYK and then you will see their red. So they will mix and match the built colors plus that red because they want to make sure that theirs is the exact same red throughout the entire process and it doesn't change as maybe like your yellow ink goes out a little bit. So it's for accuracy is the main reason for using Pantone systems.
All right, and so now let's take a look at when are you going to use one system versus the other. Amanda, you want to?
Sure, I hit a little on this. Sometimes you'll mix and match them, but the main PMS and CMYK are used for printed materials. You can use them together, you can use them separately, but RGB is going to be used for any of your digital uses. So that's going to be on TV, if you're doing commercials, it's going to be on your website, anything else that displays light. So whenever we're looking at a client, we're looking at it in all three of those. How is it going to look on CMYK? Because at some point, somebody's going to run it on a color printer. We're going to put it on somebody's website, so we need to make sure that the color converts. And then if we are privileged enough to be able to print with the Pantone color, we want to make sure that it looks consistent in that, and we'll get a little bit more into that as we start to talk about challenges with all of these.
Great. So now that we've covered some of these basics, we're going to get more into the specifics of working with color and what makes that a little tricky, and we're going to kick it off with the color blue, and Amanda taught us about.
And actually, some people, some